All right, I think we're good. Let's hold on. Oh, it's a 50-50. Which one of these is the right one to click? There's like all these scenes, and I don't know which one has us. I think it's this one. It is. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Jam Radio, episode 4. My guest this week is Esteban, TheBesteban. I'm sure a name that you are never sick of being called as a work professional.
Well, considering I chose it, I hope not.
That's why when I made Sajam when I was 12 years old, I knew, years and years from now, people who are like CEOs of companies that are worth billions of dollars will be like, hey there, Sajam. And I'll be like, oh, fuck. That's me for the rest of my life. What am I going to do? I'm like, all right, well.
Grandpa, why does everybody keep calling you Sajam? Well, son.
One day when I was 12 years old, I was playing Age of Mythology and I needed a name. And they're like, what? I'm like, you know what? Don't worry about it. It's all fine.
Before the Dark Ages, there was these things called gatherings.
Yeah, we used to do long before the COVID ages struck the earth and we were never allowed to go outside again. I have to get groceries today, and in LA County they said that you have to wear a mask every time that you go out now. So this is what I have to wear. I have my Gengar Pokemon Center mask, and I'm gonna go out in public. Imagine how all the suburban families will be when they see me walking around like this. In the grocery store, it's over, bro. You probably won't see me after this stream. This will be the end, to be honest.
Get him!
They won't even know what it is. They'll be like, he's with the devil. I'll be like, oh no, it's over. There's no way I'm gonna make it. Well, I'm sure you've been busy. As I was saying recently, every podcast guest that I've asked 4 weeks straight now, I've been like, hey, can you come on the show? Are you interested? They're like, yeah, I got nothing fucking to do because of everything going on. Of course I'll come on your show. I'm like, oh.
I've been staring at the ceiling for 3 weeks, just nonstop.
Yeah, well, some people might not be so familiar with what you actually do during the day. You want to chat a bit about who you are and what you do for work?
Yeah, so I am Esteban Martinez, also known as TheBesteban, as mentioned before. I am a videographer / editor. I do a bunch of work for events like EVO or on tours like Capcom Pro Tour or Tekken World Tour. And when I'm not doing that, I have a channel called Hold Back the Block where I make documentaries on fighting games and the culture of fighting games. That's what I do.
I was going to say, we've watched a lot of the Hold Back the Block stuff on my channel. So if people have ever checked out anything on my channel, they know, we watch a lot of that stuff. And it's always really, really cool. I think the first time I ever saw your stuff, and I don't know around when you started actually putting stuff up on Hold Back the Block, was the EVO 2014 stage footage that you got, the Galileo footage, which was...
That is like...
It's so
the
good.
Shot that everybody still talks to me about.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's super, super good. That moment, and then you did I think before that there was some interviews and stuff that was also posted on the channel, which I remember seeing some of those because I think it was I think there's one of the interviews I was interested in checking out back then. And then since then your channel has a ton of stage footage which you don't always see from events, and you mentioned that you work on tours and other events and stuff. So a lot of people might not realize, but when they watch those like outro videos or intro videos for events where there's all this B-roll footage of like the players and the arenas and the crowds and all these really incredible shots, a lot of that is your work.
Yes. It's usually my work or a team that I put together with various people like Tenno and stuff like that, but usually me, one-man film crew.
Yeah, you're usually shooting and editing too, right?
Yes. Well, it depends. If I have somebody like Gordon with me or something like that, if we can afford the budget, usually somebody takes it over. But for the most part, because budgets can be so tight with events, they usually just have me doing shooting and editing.
Yeah, and you're largely doing event work, but you also have all these documentaries as well. I think a lot of people might have watched your FGC documentary and not even realize that was you necessarily that was making it, and connected that you're the one doing all the event stuff. But I think the FGC documentary is, that's a big one for sure, right?
Yeah, I just watched it recently, actually, for the LK watched his stream, and then earlier this week on Monday, I watched it with commentary about how we put it together and kind of introducing people to people in the scene and stuff like that. And it still holds up. It was my first real big documentary project, and I felt like it was the thing that I had been doing all these interviews and small little features and stuff like that for your channel, but I always been interested in doing a longer piece about the community and fighting games, but very different from what other people were doing, where they were kind of like, well, this is Street Fighter and you deplete the health bars and all this kind of stuff, and that's how you play a fighting game. You know what Evo is? Ha ha ha. And there's a little bit of that in there.
Yeah.
But it's really about anime games and where the community has come and gone and where it's going. At what point James Chen is in there and he talks about how we might have 4,000 people at Evo, and that blew my goddamn mind, because now that's one game. So it was a cool little timepiece that still holds up. But the goal was to make something that like my grandma could watch. So it's like this real entry level kind of gateway into fighting games, and hopefully like, you know, introduces a bunch of them, and then from there hopefully people got into it and wanted to play other stuff or whatever they thought was interesting.
You can curse. The other thing I was gonna say was what like was the goal? You said that like you were watching other people's stuff and you're like, I don't know if this is exactly what I wanted. Was the goal just to improve on top of other stuff that you had seen, or was it one of those things where it was also a combination of like, as you said, well, I want to make this like kind of anime focused because LK is a big focus on it, and then so is Joe. Like Joe's another person.
Yeah,
that
Joe and John are big focus with East Coast Round Out, and it was at the time. I feel like there were a couple people making documentaries, but they were all Street Fighter focused.
Yeah.
And I mean, for a reason, like Street Fighter 4 at the time was the big game. It was the game that kind of revitalized the scene. But it was also kind of like this weird history thing where there were no games until Street Fighter 4 came. But that's not the truth. People were playing things like Guilty Gear, and like Tekken was still out, and you know, Virtual Fighter was somewhat alive. But you know, so like I wanted to make something that was like talking about these other games and not just limiting the fighting game community to this one game, and kind of showcasing all the various spectrums that the fighting game runs. You know, you have games like Smash, you have games like anime games like Guilty Gear, and like it's at its core, it's a doc about BlazBlue Chrono Phantasm. Like, who was doing that, especially at that time? So it was really kind of like I wanted to watch something that I wanted to make something that I would watch, and kind of touch on the things that I was enjoying at the time. And I had like a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because I wasn't happy with what I was seeing out there. So it's like, if nobody's going to do it the way I'm going to do it, then I might as well just get it done.
You know, so far we're 4 for 4 on this podcast of a core reason for creating being, I want this thing to exist and it's not there, or like having that feeling of whatever I want to exist, other people aren't creating it in the way that I find desirable. So that is pretty interesting to me, actually, that was a feeling. And you know what's cool is I think your documentary does show that even amongst our community, it doesn't have to be focused on necessarily whatever the big game is, Street Fighter or whatever. I think that documentary is fantastic. And yeah, as you said, it's a lot of it's focused on anime, right? And that's very interesting because, you know, when people talk about anime games, still to this day, they're like, oh, it's like the niche fighter, it's the bathroom fighter. Like, people make those jokes and stuff, but it doesn't mean you can't tell a compelling story about it, especially since, you know, they had that year where BB was on main stage of EVO with the Galileo moment that was so big. And, you know, some of the biggest moments in fighting games have come from anime games. So I don't see why, you know, the documentary couldn't focus on that and still have a lot of mainstream appeal.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I felt about the whole genre. I mean, we'll get into it, but like I still have those feelings about the genre where people look at fighting games and be like, well, it's fighting games. Like, who really plays them and all this kind of stuff. And like compared to, you know, the bigger mainstream games and just gaming in general, people kind of look at fighting games like gaming's little brother or something like that. So I had like this kind of thing to prove where it's like, no, fighting games are great. Like, you know, look at all these passionate people that go through all kinds of like races and genders and everything like that. And they're all gathered here because they enjoy fighting games. So I would like to showcase that to the greater world and kind of show people, hey, you know, we're not like, at the time, especially because like Kotaku was like a whole thing and stuff like that, where like it felt like the only time we were in the media was when we were being attacked or beaten up, somebody did something bad or something like that, where it's much different now. But at the time I was like, I want something that I can put out that's like good into the world that people can enjoy and kind of like, you know, pick it up, watch it, but like, you know, I'm gonna go check this out. Maybe I'll go play that Street Fighter game, or maybe I'll go play that BlazBlue game, or maybe I'll go play, you know, Tekken or something like that, and just kind of get more people into the thing that I love. Yeah.
So you mentioned before this documentary you were largely doing interviews. So, like, what kind of interview stuff were you doing, and like, what was the interest that got you into that? So you were obviously interested in fighting games before this, and then you had that feeling of like, maybe you know, I have some skills as a camera. This is my trade. Like, maybe how do I get that involved with something that I enjoy?
So I am mostly self-taught in terms of, well, I'm fully self-taught really in terms of editing. I taught myself how to edit with like anime music videos and stuff like that.
You were making that's why you're a Linkin Park fan. You were making the AMVs in there.
Yeah, it was great. It's like the go-to, the quintessential song.
Did you ever make like an AMV that got mad popular?
Not crazy. I think like a Fatal Fury anime one that got like 100,000 views.
Oh my god!
Yeah. But like, I guess it's popular.
This is how you become an editor? Is this all I need? I need to go back, Sasuke versus Naruto, like put Linkin Park over and edit it together. Everything I just need to do something.
bunch.
Yeah.
I used to have like hard drives full, and I lost them all, unfortunately. I thought about recently doing one while we have time, just kind of like, oh, let's see if I can make one again.
Please cut together an AMV. Please do. And use like Steve screaming in the background for like some moment. This has got to be put together. I'm super down.
But yeah, I was self-taught, so like, I taught myself editing with that. And then after college, I went to the College of New Jersey. That's the actual name, TCNJ.
You said that like so disappointingly, like, ugh, it doesn't have anything else on there.
Because I say that to people all the time. They're like, no, what college? Like Rutgers or like, I'm like, no, it's the College of New Jersey. That's the name. Yeah. Be trying to say, come on, guys. But I used to do that, and I went to school for interactive multimedia, and that was like a combination of writing, programming, and interactive computing, but it wasn't for like filming and editing. So most of my projects were with that. Like I would try to incorporate those three factors with video. And from there, I had like a roommate that had like a 5D Mark II that I bought off him when I graduated. And so I just started shooting stuff, getting used to the camera. So I decided, hey, let's go to like a fighting game event, because I was kind of aware of the scene, but I didn't have a chance to really go to events, stuff like that, in college.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's get some practice with this, because I want to get better at this. So I went to my first event, was like East Coast Throwdown 4. I took the camera with me, and that's when I started doing interviews. And my first interview was with Mike Ross.
Oh, okay.
And I think the thing that set me apart from a lot of people is that if you go back and watch those interviews during those times, a lot of people were doing interviews with like themselves also in frame, where it would be like them asking questions.
Yeah.
Where a lot of my interviews were head on the player or whoever I was talking to the camera, because I wanted to. It was by accident, sort of. It was like twofold. My interviewer ran away because they got cold feet. They're like, I can't do this. And they literally ran away from me.
That's tight.
And two, I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to scrap the idea. What if it's just like a conversation between the player and the person watching? So that's why, I mean, a lot of my earlier works, even in the FGC documentary, Rise of the Fighting Community, you don't hear me or see me at all, because I was very much focused on not making myself any part of like the story. It was like this person's story. This is what they're saying. You don't even hear me ask questions. Like the questions show up as text or whatnot. Because I was very adamant of like not being a part of it, because I didn't want it to be personality based. I wanted it to be community based. Yeah,
I think that was something that I was going to bring up later as well, is that you sort of transitioned into being on camera a little bit more with some of your work, especially with the Patreon stuff. But yeah, I was going to say, so you're shooting these interviews. What made the process go from wanting to go from like interviews to wanting to do the documentaries a little bit more often? Was it like finding work in them, or was it just like an interest in creating something more long form in general?
The first, God, it's probably gonna piss some people off when I say this, but the first reason why, one of the primary reasons why I did a documentary, one of the primary reasons why I kickstarted a documentary, is because at the time, so many people were raising monies for documentaries that never came out. So they'd be raising like $25,000 or $130,000, and then like they're still not out. Some of those just never saw the light of day. So I was like, all right, this is kind of building bad will in the community. What if I kickstart something for like 10 grand, which was not nearly enough to make a documentary after like all fees and all that stuff. So like really only 8. Yeah,
but you lowball it because you want this to exist and you want the money to hit, right? So yeah.
Yes. And so like I lowballed it, and like I didn't have a name or anything like that. Like, and I kind of have a relative name in the community now, but like even then it was like, who is this person, right? And through the goodwill of people, I was able to make this documentary and show that you can do it. Like you can have a plan. Year and a half, I think it was like a year and a half, right, to filming, production, out, and release. So that was like the primary reason of doing that. And then it wasn't until, so the consequence, like the monkey's paw, right? So the consequence of that doc doing so well was that I met Rick. Rick hooked me up with Bandai Namco. Bandai Namco was like, hey, we want to do like a 2016 tour series, because we're trying to bring this game around, and we want, so that led to that project, which led to me becoming full-time, which led to me kind of moving away from the channel and focusing on events and docs for other people and stuff like that.
Yeah, working on projects away from your stuff. I see, yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't until my work with Noclip that it was like, oh, maybe I should go back to this and start to kind of do what I was doing, but take a different approach with it, but like kind of more full-length stories.
I see, that makes sense. Yeah, so You know, it's funny you said monkey's paw curling, and you're like, I met Rick, and I was like, ooh, that is monkey paw. I was like,
oh no, here we go.
I was like, ooh, you met Rick. But what's it called? I was gonna say, yeah, that's interesting. So you went full time in 2016. That was around the time that you started filming the Tekken doc, which is great. People to this day, I think the Tekken doc is really fun to go back and watch. I mean, like, largely because of Fat Anakin, that always cracks me up, but just in general, it's like a really interesting look at where Tekken was back then and how, like,
I like that. That's the point you took away, Fat Anakin.
Yeah, he's lost a lot of weight, and then also the fact that when you look at that, it's like that doc. It makes the TWT is so small in that documentary, right? It's like we're bringing this thing around to Wizard World, and like, you know, it's going to be around here, and we might have
not a world tour.
Yeah,
it's just the Tekken tour.
Yeah,
because it was only in the United States.
Yeah, which is like so interesting to look at compared to where the TWT is now, because there hasn't been a documentary since then on TWT. It was just that 1 year. It was the Tekken tour documentary, right?
Mm-hmm. There might have been one this year, if you know, things didn't explode.
Yeah, well, this year would have been the year, but you know, that is too bad. Your face was the immediate. I just felt it melt into itself. Oh no,
it's so frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, I haven't been out of my house in a while. It sucks. Yeah, there's a lot of work out there. But yeah, okay, so that's interesting that the Tekken doc was the one thing that you had there. What made you go from doing this stuff for tours and other people and then doing, I guess, the Tekken documentary, or working with Noclip?
God, so like before this whole started, I was kind of like a freelance jack of all trades, mostly a web developer, and I'm wearing the Eagles stuff. I used to work for the Philadelphia Eagles actually as a web developer.
I thought you just really loved the Eagles because you're constantly wearing the Eagles hoodies and stuff.
I just have a lot of free clothes, again, from the Philadelphia Eagles. No, they're a great team. Super Bowl champs. Woo! But so I was like a freelance web developer. I left the Eagles, became like freelance, stuff like that, and I didn't really like it. I was actually having a conversation about with someone following their passions today, and you know, between the combination of the FGC doc and the combination of the Tekken work, I was able to become freelance.
Yeah.
Like fully 100% freelance. I didn't have to work a 9 to 5. Like this became my 9 to 5, which, you know, again, about the monkey's paw, when you do something you really like for a living, it doesn't become just a 9 to 5. It becomes like a 9 to the eternity. Like you're always working.
Yeah. There's never a minute where you're not, it's even if you're not physically doing something at the time, your brain is always locked on to, yeah, tomorrow I got to do this, and then I got to do this, and I have this meeting. It never escapes you. It becomes your life.
Yeah. So what happened is, so I was doing what I was doing, and I was building up a body of work. And like I'm a big Giant Bomb fan, so like I watch Giant Bomb a lot. And Danny O'Dwyer was somebody who frequently on there, and I only knew them through that. I didn't realize they had like a big like GameSpot like following and all that kind of stuff. And he announces that he's going to leave to go start this whole thing on Patreon. So he starts Noclip. It's mostly in the West Coast. And then one day he's like, "Oh, I'm going to move to the East Coast." He was moving out here with his wife and stuff. So I, being the person that I am, just sent them. I was a patron, so I sent them a patron message. I was like, "Hey, you know, I hear you're coming to the East Coast. I do some video work. Here's some stuff that's out here. If you ever need help, hit me up." And I thought that was going to be it, right? Like that was just going to be the end.
It's one of the million emails you send or messages you send, like, "Hey, if you need freelance work, hit me up." That's like, it's just one of those.
I made a documentary by myself. I can't sleep anymore. True. So it was like messed up because like I didn't hear anything for a month, right? I didn't expect to hear anything. So I was coming back from Chicago for something, and just as we take off, my DMs go off, and it's like, "You have a message from Danny O'Dwyer." And I go to click it, and we had just lost service. So it's just spinning. So I have this 2-hour flight going, man, I wonder what that was about.
That is the worst thing in the universe.
It was awful. Still didn't buy the Wi-Fi, though.
That is impressive. Well, that shows that you're a true freelancer, because buying Wi-Fi when you're a freelancer. I always see people talk about how they bought in-flight Wi-Fi. I'm like, how much are they paying you? That's what I want. Right? Where do I get that budget? What the heck?
What weird tax scheme do you have going on?
Yeah, I'm like, who can afford in-flight with $16? I'm not sure about that.
So yeah, so we hooked up and like we started working together, and you know, I got introduced to him. I got introduced to Jeremy Jane. Jeremy Jane handles all the primary filming and edit. Well, now he does editing, but mostly he was like the director of photography, I guess is what you would call it. for Noclip, and I work with them for a couple of things. Mostly honestly helping in the background with like things like the patron show that they would do. And then like I got to work with them on the Fallout 76 stuff. I got to go to Bethesda and help film all that stuff. So if you watch the behind the scenes, I made that for them. And a lot of the slow motion like beauty shots, stuff like that are me. So it was like my first real kind of like project working with. And I got to learn the ins and outs of one, managing a Patreon, and two, like running like a video business by yourself. Because I got to basically watch Danny figure it out as he was figuring out, and I got to learn from him. So actually like my Patreon is built like Noclip's because Danny helped me build it.
Right. Yeah.
And like I remember sitting, like we went to like the Mortal Kombat like preview event or something like that, and like we were sitting in a diner an hour before we had to go in because we landed in the morning, and we were just talking about it. So like he was like, so what do you want to target? Like what kind of audience you want? And we worked out all like the tiers and all this kind of stuff. So he was super influential, not just in the style of work I do, but also how I built a Patreon, how I maintain that. And you know, we still talk nowadays. They're mostly they moved back out to West Coast, which is why I don't really work with them that much because they're super busy with a lot of stuff over there.
For sure.
But the hope is that like one day we'll be able to do something again soon.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I remember there was like that moment where you started doing a lot more Noclip stuff, and I remember that like being something that was a topic. It's interesting you mentioned the Patreon too, because yeah, I'm sure that in the beginning it's one of those things where it's kind of unexplored waters, right? Like I don't think Patreon was even that. Like it hadn't been around very long probably when that was a thing, so people were trying to figure out exactly how to do it correctly because the reward tiers and like satisfying a specific kind of audience like that, it takes a lot of know-how. You don't just start a Patreon, right? Like it's not just something you do. You have to have all these different tiers and all this like thought put into it. I mean,
if you were to do it right, you don't just start a Patreon and then leave it there. Like if you want to, I mean, we can get into it, but like if you really want to make it succeed, you have to kind of make it the center of your business.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Everything leads back into it, and it's where everything comes out of. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you worked a bit with Noclip, and then you said, you know, obviously they moved back. You guys haven't been doing as much stuff. So largely you were doing event work, right? So what's the difference between when you're doing your documentary and your interview work and then doing stuff at events where you're maybe filming B-roll? You work at stuff like HDQ, and obviously you mentioned all the tours and EVO and Combo Breaker, all these different fighting game events, TWT finals, stuff where people will probably see your work and kind of similar to the documentary work you do, never see your face. They just see shots of the camera. They just see stuff that you've edited or put together, but they don't know necessarily who's the man behind the camera.
And that's intentionally by design, because if people recognize who you are and you're doing, like they see you with the camera, you kind of compromise the shot because then they might act up or they might do something to kind of bring attention to themselves. So that was always like a big fear of mine of getting attention because I don't want attention. Like I got the Galileo Dogura shot because I happened to be in the right place at the right time and they didn't know who I was. And they weren't acting to the camera. Like that's part of it. But for events and the like, it's real, I want to say simple, but compared to what I do with documentary wise, it's there's definitely a different workload. So like with events, it's more about, especially now that I've been put in positions where I'm managing a team and it's not just me. It's more about knowing where, you know, everyone's going to be, knowing what's going on in the run of show, like if there are any reveals or the like with something like a Tekken World Tour, like, you know, are they going to announce characters? I need to know when that's going to happen so I can position the people that I have, like other videographers, where they need to be at the right time. Making sure it's like a producer role, right? Like it's like on top of all the filming and stuff, there's like making sure people get fed, making sure people take a break, making sure that like you have to manage people at that.
Yeah. And also the schedule, right? Like, yeah, as you said, if there's a reveal at this time, somebody on the camera needs to find Tasty Steve and position like the camera towards him so that when the reveal goes live, you know, you have the shot.
Yeah, like that was a big thing with the Guilty Gear reveal at EVO, right? Because like I think right before it was Soul Calibur, and they got on stage and they did Soul Calibur reveal, and then like some of my people were coming back, and so I have to run out there and go, no, get back out there, like get back, get in position. There's another one. We're not done. Which like some people in the front be like, what do you mean there's another one? Like, and I'm like, shut up. Like go back there. Ignore everything I'm saying, crowd.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that the people are in position to get the shots, because that's how you get the shots you use for trailers and the shots you use for like promotional materials, or even for EVO itself, like the rollout and like stuff like that. Yeah. So events are a mixture of managing people and making sure, you know, that you're doing your job as a videographer, making sure that you're in the right place, making sure that you're aware of what's going on. Like if you hear a crowd cheering, probably want to go check out what they're cheering about and what for. And that's that end. With making documentaries, it's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah. How much about live events do you feel like is knowing the stories going into trying to shoot stuff like that, or figuring out the stories when your feet is like on the ground at the event, like something fascinating is happening and you have to figure out where to point the camera because you're like, oh wait, who upset who? What is this game? Like, what's going on here? Like, how much of that is stuff that you think about beforehand just by being in the community and knowing stuff, or stuff that you have to figure out live and who to film and what's going on?
I think you can't do this job effectively if you aren't following the storylines going on in the scene. I think if you were just somebody who showed up and was like, well, I like Sonic Fox, so I'm just going to follow Sonic Fox all right around the tournament. Well, most likely Sonic Fox is going to win, right? So like, what's your story there? Like, you only have a story there if they lose, or like, you know, if it's like a big tournament or something like that. So if you're just an outside fan coming in trying to do this work, kind of hard to find the narratives. So I think knowing the narratives definitely helps. But on the flip side, fighting game tournaments are probably like the hardest thing to shoot because it's so volatile, right? You can go in with a set idea, like I just said, like Sonic Fox probably going to win the tournament, right? They could lose round 2, right?
Yeah.
So like, you have to be ready to adjust your narrative or to follow the narrative or to think fast in your feet, which is why working fighting game events is so stressful because your best laid plans can be destroyed because of somebody's sick ass mix up. And it's like, oh no, what do I do now? I got to follow Mr. Sick Ass Mix Up. Okay, so now I got to split up this way and go this way. And you kind of just got to be like, all right, we got to. And that's kind of why I do a lot of things by myself, because I can adjust quicker than having to like find 4 people and be like, all right, here's the plan now. Like no, I'm going to follow this person. I'm going to follow this person. Hey, do you have 20 minutes for an interview? Mic up real quick. Let's talk, stuff like that. So it's a little bit of both. I would say going in, knowing the narratives definitely helps, but I would say being able to improv and being able to adjust and be quick on your feet is just as important.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, true for a lot of roles in something like a fighting game tournament, just given how, like you said, volatile a lot of the storyline. If you go in expecting a certain finals, the chances of that ever happening is like near zero, right? It's like so unlikely that that's even something that's going to go on. So yeah, that is something that's interesting. So how do you balance, like you said, you grab people for interviews and stuff. How do you balance when you're at an event, like your time to film stuff for your own pieces and stuff like that, and then also the work that you have to do for like whatever, you know, you're managing? Is it just stuff that like doesn't get used in shots for like the event? You're like, okay, well, I guess that's stuff that I'll use for B-roll later. Like, what's that kind of balance like?
It depends. For me, I have a philosophy of whatever I'm being paid for comes first. That's my job, right? So like, for instance, the combo breaker thing we did with Rick, the inside combo breaker piece. A lot of that is all on Sunday because all of my duties, the Friday, Saturday are so busy that there is no chance to film anything. So a lot of that shot was all shot on Sunday because we only had finals to worry about, right? We don't have to make a bunch of top 8 videos. I don't have to worry too much about where, you know, everybody else is because we're basically focusing on like just these stages in the room. And occasionally the retro stage if there's a final or something like that over there, but it's not as hectic. So a lot of that was all shot on Sunday, and the interview was done while we were setting up things on Wednesday and Thursday. So just scheduled in a way where it would not interfere with my actual duties I'm being paid for. Because with clients, I do not want them to feel like I'm sacrificing my ability to suit my own needs, because then that's going to lead to a lot of bad will, and like they're not going to hire you back or anything like that. So I make it very clear, one, that I have an intention to do a project here at the event separate from my duties here, and 2, make sure that I ensure them that it's not going to affect my abilities in the slightest. And if it does, I'll scrap it. I'll just come up with a different way and just do something else, or adjust what I need to do in a slightly manner to figure out, you know, the process. Yeah. But yeah, it's tough, and it's been something I've been actually kind of navigating and figuring out as I do more and more stuff with Hold Back to Block. But that's the key thing I keep in mind. Is like, you don't want to offend the client or have the client lose confidence in your abilities because they think you're just there for your own stuff. Yeah, like you wanted the flight and hotel to film for your own channel or whatever, right? Yeah. I see what you mean. I mean, I have the same kind of thing. Like when people ask me, like, hey, we want to do an interview, or hey, we want to talk to you about stuff or whatever. I'm like, hey, this is my schedule for the weekend. If it can work around this, cool. If it can't, tough luck. You didn't pay for me to be here, right? Like, I'm obviously working for someone else. So if it doesn't fall into those guidelines, like, too bad. I guess we can't do an interview at this thing. I'm sure that I have told you before, hey, this is my schedule for the weekend. We have to fit. This is what we could do. You got to be, you know, if you're free at one of these times, we can do something like this. We can sit down for an interview. I mean, that's what happened with Canada Cup, right? It's like, hey, on Sunday, you know, right before finals or whatnot, like I need you to sit down and talk to me for an hour about combo breakers. Let's go. So you see there's a sandwich, right? And you have like sourdough or rye bread.
Look, all right, sometimes there's a lot of things that go on in my brain, and that's one of the big ones. I'm constantly thinking about sandwiches because I love them. Speaking of your interviews, and I did an interview, a couple of interviews with you, I guess a few times now.
Yep.
What's your interview process like, and how did you develop the skill set to interview someone and make, you know, one thing about interviews is you don't want it to come across as like they're just answering the questions that you set up for them with specific answers, and you don't want it to just feel so informal. Like, what's the kind of process like to interview, and like, how did you learn how to be an effective interviewer?
It's changed. Oh, there's like a hailstorm going outside my window now. Sick. It's changed considerably since working with Danny over at Noclip. Before, it was really loose, like kind of like I'd have topics I was going to hit, or like something like, you know, I'd be interviewing Mike Ross when he's on complexity. Like, well, tell me, like, they were very like surface level questions. Like, tell me about how it's like to be on a team, Mike. And he would be like, ha, ha, ha. And that would be it. He might remember my name or not. But
that's how I'm going to answer all my questions. Ha, ha, ha. That's how I'll make sure to answer that way.
The life bar goes down. But it was like very like, I would have like a list of notes and like a list of questions and stuff like that. Like typical interview stuff. And then when I saw how Danny did it, where it was like he would have that list of notes, but he would never, and they might be on the side, but he would always remain focused on the subject. He would always look at them. He would always talk to them. It was more of a conversation. So I kind of incorporated that, and also, weirdly enough, I worked in E3 once where for Capcom, where we had to do something with like the New Day and the Elite.
Oh yeah, where Steve got kicked.
Where Steve got kicked. It was like a Street Fighter thing, and I watched them set up the show in a conversation. So we're like, yeah, you know, we'll sit down, we're like, oh, you guys will come in and we'll come in, and then maybe we'll do this, and then like, you know, we'll structure matches like this, and then we'll super kick Steve. And so I watched them do that, and I was like, between the combination of that and the combination of Danny, his interviews, is like, what if I combine the two? So now I don't go in with a set list of questions, really. Like I have an idea of what topics and what themes I want to hit when I have the interview and stuff like that. But I mostly structure it as a conversation. So if you've ever done an interview with me, like, or if you ever, you know, will do an interview with me for anybody watching, what happens is I set everything up and then we just talk. Yeah. And, you know, I'm a one-person crew, so I make it well aware of like, hey, I might look at the camera to adjust things, make sure you're in focus and make sure the audio is good. But you keep talking, I can see you, and don't worry about it. If I need you to stop, I'll tell you to stop. If I need you to repeat something, I need you to repeat something. But otherwise, we're just having a conversation. And then we just have the conversation. 2 hours go by, I have what I need. You don't feel like you've been, you know, interrogated, and everyone has a good day. So that's how I structure it, where it's just much more talking and much more free form and more topic based than rather like going down a set list of questions. Because I think, especially in fighting games, a lot of people are not used to talking in front of a camera.
Yeah, for sure.
Or being interviewed. Like it's a lot of pressure. Like people second guess themselves. They worry about what they're going to say. They second think all the time. Whereas if I'm just talking to you like we're talking to now, you don't really think about it because we're just talking.
Yeah.
You ignore the camera. You don't realize it's on you. And then I go back at editing because editing is powerful. If you're a good editor, you can make any conversation into a documentary. Most of my documentaries are just conversations that I have structured narratively.
Yeah, we'll just B-roll cut over stuff, and like, yeah, there's like some music in some places, but that's kind of generally the idea. And yeah, I think that's an important difference, I think, between when I did an interview with you and when I've done interviews with other people is, there's something about having such a specific list of questions and approaching it in that kind of manner of, I am here to ask this question and get this answer, that feels so like informal. It feels like I could have answered these on an email, or like somebody could have asked me on a Twitch chat and I would have just answered the questions rather than like actually having an interesting moment with somebody like on the mic. You know what I mean? Right.
And there's inflexibility in making a structured interview, right? So like I might, I'm trying to think how to say this. I might go in with a certain agenda or certain motive, or like most people who make a list go in with a certain agenda or a certain motive, right?
Right.
Or they're like, I'm trying to get this specific story. And you might say something that contradicts that.
Yeah.
Most people won't follow up because it does not go with the piece they're making. Whereas if we're having a conversation and I say something like, well, what did you think of this? And then you say something like completely like different that I'm not expecting. I go, tell me a little bit more about that. Let's chat about that. Like, and the piece might become something totally different by then. Yeah. So it's like, it goes back to working events where you have to kind of be able to pivot. Having a less structured interview and not being dominated by the idea of like, this piece has to be this, so this interview has to be structured this way, allows you to pivot when something sudden might arise, or something that is different from the narrative you have in your head might arise, and then you can follow that path there, and you might get something even better than your initial idea if you're able to be light on your feet in an interview.
Was there an interview where you noticed that? Like the big thing was like, man, if I was so structured here, this would be like an issue that I run into where the answer wouldn't be something that's along with what I expected or the narrative I happened? Or is it just like, it's all the time? You don't even think
a lot of the
it.
Killer Instinct stuff has been like that.
Oh, really?
Whereas I have not necessarily gone in with like an agenda or anything like that, but like I have like the story of what I know of the game history in my head. And like, especially when talking to Adam, to Keats, like, he's got a brilliant mind for fighting games. So there are things that I may kind of understand like on the fringes, but he definitely knows, or maybe things I have wrong, and he's not afraid to tell you if they're wrong or not. So, there was like, I forget exactly what question it was, but he's like, well, it doesn't work like that. And I could have just deaded it there, right? Like, yeah. Like, well, okay. But I was like, no, let's talk about it. How does it work? And especially with like netcode stuff, like, well, we got into like conversation, stuff like that, how it like, the frames work and all this kind of stuff. And even with like how budgets work for fighting games, like how seasons work on like a budget thing, like how the contracts work. That stuff wouldn't have happened if I didn't let him take me there. Like if I was had a stranglehold in the conversation and just want to be like, well, I just want to talk about what I want to talk about. That's not how it works. You have to be able to be like, everyone who's interviewed has something they want to say. So you have to let them, one, you have to kind of lead them to it, but two, once you get there, you have to let them go and just let them ride and, hang on, because it's going to be fun. Yeah. But you can't, especially talking to Keats, it's great.
Yeah, he's a hoot for sure. He's always got something to say.
I love I could have like, it was like him, everyone I've talked to on this Killer Instinct project, which I guess we'll talk about in a little bit, but like everyone I've talked to on this Killer Instinct project has been great. Keats has definitely been a standout. I think I could have talked to Ken Law for 8 hours and not been bored.
Yeah, I believe it.
Ken Law is fantastic, but yeah, really on Microsoft is great too. So like there are certain people, like I don't usually have a lot of bad, but there are definitely certain people who are just like, wow, we should just do the story on you.
Yeah. I was just going to say, one thing that's interesting about a lot of events and like conversations in general, even outside of interviews, is we don't actually, any of us, see each other that often or sit down and talk that often. I feel like the longest conversations you and I have had is like we're in Japan, on like vacation days before Evo Japan or like Master Cup or something. So we just hang out for like a day. And we just talk like the entire day. And I think to myself, like, man, these are people that I see at events all the time, but we're all so busy that we never just get to sit down and chat, which is why it's always fun to do stuff like this. I realize the same thing with like Rick and like even Carter and like Gerald. Like I see Gerald like once a year. Yeah. And so like
you just never get a chance to talk to him. Like I hang out with Gerald, like I was in Korea doing that piece, and like we were just in that studio they had. We're just drinking beer, just hanging out, just talking and stuff like that. I was like, well, I don't get to do this ever. This is great.
Yeah. These jobs, man, we're always so goddamn busy. If only we just got paid money to do nothing, that'd be tight.
Oh man. Well, I mean, some people have made that a career, but hey.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm almost there. I'm just drinking coffee. What's the KI documentary situation? You brought up a few times that you're working on it. I know people are very excited for it. It's long. I know that for sure. Yeah. It's going to be a big project. I know that you have like an idea about when it's going to come out. You've been working on it for a long time. What's that like?
So the status of the KI doc is that all the interviews I did, 17 interviews, right? Each interview is probably like an hour minimum, hour and a half.
Sure.
And they're all cut up into segments now. Each segment is about like 2 hours long, stuff like that. So now I have to cut all that stuff down to what I'm hoping will be a probably minimum hour and a half movie. Hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. We'll see how long that be. But yeah, it's now all cut up. All the interviews are cut up. I might do one more interview remotely. I'm trying to get in contact with the person. But as it stands right now, where we're just cutting in story. Like, so now I'm just figuring out the story, figuring out the flow of the story, cutting it from there. And then hopefully my goal would be to have it out mid-May. So next month. In a month's time, you probably start seeing the beginnings of it. And then probably like mid to late May, it'll be out.
And I'm not going to see you at all for a month. It's over. You're deep.
No, I'm deep. I've spent like what? I think my routine now is wake up, find food, edit, play Valorant, go to bed, wake up, find food, edit, play Valorant, go to bed.
That will be your schedule solid until this is over, probably, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And then who knows from there, honestly. So, like, you know, that's been my big distraction of not thinking about the outside world and falling apart is this Killer Instinct stuff. But it's like the thing, right? Like it's gonna be the project where it's looking like it's gonna be the project that completely exemplifies what Hold Back to Block is trying to be in terms of not just talking to fighting game players about, well, why did you get hit mixed up, and you know, how does it feel streaming, blah blah blah. It's really a narrative-based thing that goes beyond just the players, but also hits the culture and also hits the development of fighting games. Because we can talk to ourselves all the time, but I always wanted to build like a pipeline between developer and fan, or developer and player, and kind of really get to how these games are built and what goes in the mind of game designers and stuff like that. So that I'm hoping this will exemplify that, because it has a lot of the story, because it's a crazy story of how it was built. Has a lot of like technical know-how, like, so if you've seen the Talking Netcode video with Keats, like that's a lot of the stuff that's going to be in there, or a lot of the type of stuff that's going to be in there. And then we have a little bit of the community side, because KI's main groundswell of support is the community.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was a lot of the stuff that went into the tour. I'm sure you talked to Brandon, and that was probably a big thing that he mentioned, and I'm sure that the MS guys talked about it a little bit. But yeah, that's one thing that I think is important, is at the very beginning of this discussion about the doc, you said, like, now I filmed everything, the story is coming together. It wasn't like you started with the story and went out to film stuff, right? I think that is kind of the important takeaway of like everything we've been talking about so far, is like you talked with everybody, and then once you finish talking with everybody, like, all right, what is this collective of 1 hour interviews with 17 different people now say?
Yeah, and like you go in with a little bit of story, like I know about like Twitch, the handover seasons between developers and like how like the game is like a revival of a classic fighting game, and like I'm aware of Killer Instinct, so you go in there with like an idea, like a framework of like, these are the beats I want to hit, like same with the interviews, like these are the beats I want to hit, but you're not necessarily like ruled by them. So like when I talked to Ken Log told me how the original KI came together, and that wasn't something I wasn't entirely interested in before I talked to him. And then I talked to him and was like, well, this has to be in here, because this sets up a lot of how this game even exists in 2013. Right. So we need to kind of go into that, and like same with like Max. Like Max had a lot to say about the old KI and the like. And like I interviewed people that maybe fighting game people might not be aware of, but more general mainstream people might be aware of, like Matt McMuscles, who's a Let's Player, but he pushed KI really hard as well when the game came out and stuff like that, and helped introduce along with Max that game to a whole new audience. So like it's not just sticking in our wheelhouse, but also kind of looking outside and how like this game affected, you know, not just the fighting game community, but fighting games, but gaming as a whole. Yeah,
that's an important perspective that in our community, I think a lot of people maybe don't think about. It's funny you mentioned everybody's positive feelings about the old KIs. I also said stuff about the old KIs in my interview that I recall.
Yeah, I played the old KI recently. Man,
you agree with me?
It's something. It is.
It sounds like you're on my team.
But some of the micros, like Adam Eisgreen talked about it too, where it's like that was like, and not to get too deep into the thing, but like they were aware, like, hey, some of these rules were like convoluted and like weird, messed up. And like KI2, you have like direct counters to certain moves, so like you just couldn't do moves because I could just do something that would counter all the time. So that's part of the story, right? Like where like that might have worked in the 90s. Yeah. But we need to, when we're bringing this game back, we have to be able to be like, all right, let's look at what our competition is doing now, or like how fighting games change, and how can we keep the spirit of the law without being direct. Because I think if they had made KI 2013 with KI 1 rules or KI 2 rules, that game would have never taken off.
Yeah, I'm right there with you for sure.
It's rough.
I was gonna say,
I was trying to record footage for it, and I was like, why the fuck do I do a combo? What the goddamn hell?
It doesn't make any sense. What the hell's it is funny because if you played 2013 first, going back to it, you're like, this doesn't
it's
make
impossible.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know what's going on. Because you're like, it's the same kind of idea, but like completely foreign. It's like in another body. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, sure. And then keeping up with KI, like, and you'll show your stream, in a little bit, but like keeping up with KI is tough as it is. Like trying to find the linkers, stuff like that. Having to also react to a linker with a specific move and a specific strength of move is like Like,
yeah.
Oh god.
It is super tough. I mean, I think even following KI combos currently is like, it takes, you got to be a specific kind of person to really understand the game in 2013, let alone like, that version, like you said. Yeah. So we chatted a little bit about the KI doc. I'm sure a lot of people are excited for it. You've worked on a lot of doc stuff. And is there any other projects that you have? Like, you've done some mini projects recently that have come out. We just watched one of them, as you mentioned, the Gerald one. Yep. You guys have put out a lot of stuff like that on your Patreon, and I've really been enjoying a lot of those things. And you have this one is a big one. Is there any other projects that are coming up that you guys have been talking about that aren't out yet?
So it's funny because like I keep saying like we and like you guys and stuff like, but it's just me.
It's just you. Just me. Okay.
Yeah. I use we a lot, especially when I talk on the Pull Back to Block Twitter, just to like not. I hate like brands that are like, oh hey, I'm cool and hip. Like I just don't like to do that. So I kind of use we as just like in case we occasionally get like somebody else.
Sure.
It's not just everyone thinks of that Twitter like it's just me, right?
Yeah.
So, but for I edit everything, I plan everything, I shoot everything.
Gotcha.
I do it. But
we here at Jam Radio, we really appreciate the stuff you put together, Esteban. Thanks.
Yeah, you and the dogs and
Don't even count Anthony.
No, don't know what he does. His planes are terrible. But in terms of upcoming projects, so it's funny you mention that because I was going to have one more of those smaller ones come out. So we did one on Emily, we did one on Gerald, and there was going to be another one on Wooly Wolves or Wooly Madden, who's a popular Let's Player who's been doing a good job of getting people into fighting games with his current stuff over at Wooly Versus.
Yeah.
But I've been chomping at the bit to get to this KI stuff, and I was kind of doing these mini stuff to kind of stem the flow before we got into KI. But then I realized like I was putting off the KI stuff. Because like a lot of stuff, even the mini docs, a lot of stuff goes into it. It's a lot of editing, a lot of recording. So I've moved that one till after KI, and then after that, I have a couple of ideas of what I want to do. But in terms of set projects, it'll be KI, then it'll be Wooly, and then I'm actually doing my first non-FGC project, but kind of FGC adjacent, where I'm doing a doc on Games Done Quick.
Oh, okay, GDQ, yeah.
So, and then kind of testing the waters of how that works, where it's surprisingly closer to fighting games than you think. A lot of fighting games people work on it or are part of the event. So I'm kind of doing like an off-topic brand of like Hold Back the Block, but still on the same channel. And then we'll see what goes from there, because who knows when events will happen again.
That's something I will get into in a second here. But yeah, I was gonna ask, what is it like doing GDQ and the other? Like you've done a few speedrunning events and you did the Zelda event as well. What's
Zeldathon.
Yeah, what's it like to do those kinds of events? I'm sure people love GDQ, right? I feel like people will always watch it. It has million viewers all the time. It raises $1 trillion every single year. So yeah, what's it like to work on that?
Those are the most challenging events I ever work in a year. And I have to do 2 of them a year because it's a little bit more investigation, a little bit of more kind of research, because I've been doing it for a couple of years now, since I guess 2017. I think my first one was 2016, the winter one, HDQ 2017, but I went as like a fan essentially. Sumi basically hooked me up with a pass and I got in, and I was like, I'll do some shots and I'll do like smaller piece. But it wasn't until the summer one where I really started to do the finale videos. Right. If you aren't aware and you watch Games Done Quick and you see like those awesome, super cool, nicely produced finale videos at the end of the stream, that's all me.
Okay.
So that's what they hire me to bring in, and what I do. And I also give them the footage for promotional purposes and the like. But they hire me as a video guy to come in. And so like I land on like Friday or Saturday. Then I have to figure out what interviews I want to do, who's running. Like I look at the schedule, all that kind of stuff, and film for 3 days, and then have to have basically a 4-minute movie done by Friday, so they can test it out, put it in their system, and edit and upload it and have it out. So it's like an extreme like rat race in terms of like getting all this stuff together and finding the stories and also making it like emotional, right? Because it's very different from what I normally do, where like it's very informative, very factual. Those kind of projects are supposed to cap off this big celebration of look at all the things that we've done for charity and like how we've all come together. And then I have to do that twice a year, and I have to up myself every 6 months.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, this one wasn't as good as the one in the summer, and you're like, they must have got a new guy.
Yeah, it is probably the most stressful, which is why like I don't talk to a lot of people. Like I have a lot of friends in speedrunning, so like, why aren't you hanging out? Because I'm in my hotel room with my 6 Chipotle meal a day, going, this is not the, and I'm like freaking out over like edits and stuff like that. Until like that,
I gotta make people cry. You're just like stuffing your face. You're just like
I'm trying to make the near automata of speedrunning videos here, okay?
It's got to be 4 minutes long and make at least 80% of the audience tear up.
Yeah, and thankfully it's been doing that. So they keep bringing
Somebody
me
in the
back.
chat said those make me cry every year. So you did the right thing.
I know that, like, it's funny because, like, I'm not a big, like, emotional person. I'm kind of an asshole. So I don't, like, let my feelings go very often. But, like, there'll be times where I'm editing that stuff and, like, I'll be like, all right,
just a single tear. That's how you know. You're like,
yeah, like, this is gonna be awesome. Like, I know I got stuff here because if I'm feeling it, somebody's gonna be a wreck in the crowd. Let's go.
That's the goal. Let's go. Make them cry. Oh man. So yeah, I was gonna say you do the GDQ. You talked. I guess you didn't talk a little bit about Zeldathon, but that's another thing that you do. I'm assuming
Zeldathon is a completely different. Zeldathon is like God, that's a strange story. A person named Super MC Gamer, who's a rad dude, hit me up because they saw my GDQ work and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna do a documentary." He was part of the Minecraft guys.
Okay, yeah.
Didn't mean to say that. But he hit me up and he's like, "I run this thing called Zeldathon, which is like a week-long charity event where we play Zelda games." And I was like, "Well, that's cool." And he's like, "We want to do a documentary. You want to come out and do it?" I'm like, "Great." So they flew me out to shoot like some extra stuff for like their Kickstarter. They said the Kickstarter 25K and they made it in like 3 days.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, okay. Obviously, this is a whole world I have not been aware of. So I came back and I shot for a year. They put out a documentary and now I'm like, they made me part of their team. So actually, they were supposed to do something this summer called Parallel Worlds, which was like a Zeldathon marathon, but with anything but Zeldathon. And I was actually going to run Devil May Cry 5 there.
Right. I saw you getting ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that unfortunately has been postponed to next year, but I am going to be doing it as long as everything holds. So like I've gone from becoming a documentary person or a film person for them to actually being on their team and trying to help them raise money for charity and like.
That is really cool. I was gonna say one like I guess thing that I've noticed in a transition from you doing your Patreon a little bit more is that you've done a lot more on camera stuff. So like a lot of the individual things on Hold Back the Block, obviously, and it kind of is your same style of work, but you're like the face, you open and end the videos, and also it's your narrative, like you're doing the narration for a lot of it. How different is that from the normal stuff that you're doing?
It's super different.
Being on camera is great, right?
I have on camera, on stage, I actually used to be a slam poet for a couple years. I used to do slam poetry.
What do you mean you used to be a slam poet? You're just going to say that real casually?
Yeah, I used to do slam poetry in Jersey at college and stuff like that. So like I'm used to performing like I went to the finals one year and I performed for like 300 people and stuff like that.
Oh my God.
So like I'm used to it. And like I used to analyze because I'm super competitive about everything I do. So when I did slam poetry, like I would actually record everything, record my sets, then go back the next night, listen to them over and over again. Okay, I can hit this line better. I can hit this better. I can deliver this better. Maybe we can rewrite this. And so I'm used to hearing my own voice a lot.
Okay.
But the reason, like I said before, the reason why I didn't want to put myself on camera a lot is because I didn't want to make the focus me.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be a part of the story. But it wasn't until working with Danny where I saw how especially with the Team Spooky documentary, he was very supportive of the idea. It took a little bit of selling on him because it was such a strange concept. They focus on a lot of big games and the like. They don't really do a lot of community pieces, and they weren't sure. Like they weren't exactly sold on the idea of like
who's this guy?
Why is this person important?
Yeah.
And then when we got into the doc, then you saw why he was important, right?
Yeah.
But you know, he helped me. Like he showed me how to use voiceover effectively. Like it's not to dominate the story. It's to basically kind of get people to one phrase of the narrative to another. And you don't have to be the showcase. You can do it in a way where it's like, well, we need to link these two pieces together. Let's kind of smooth out the narrative with the voiceover and use the voiceover as a narrative storytelling tool.
Yeah.
But it's also what's necessary. So like Danny and Noclip are successful because Danny has put himself, not just because they're big quality projects and Danny's great what he does, but it's sort of like he made himself like a personality, right? He has an audience. It's easier to establish an audience if you put yourself in front of the camera.
Yeah.
So with the whole back to block stuff, I made that sort of a focus of let's kind of step out of my comfort zone and put myself in front of the camera a little bit, not too much, just enough to be like, well, we enter the videos and we have fun with it with like the netcode video where everything gets chopped up and like delayed and all that kind of stuff, or the baguette in the Long Live the Night.
The baguette was great.
We can have fun with it and kind of like, haha, like everyone gets to see who I am, and then we can just move to the story and then like kind of build an audience from there. And I think that's helped a lot. That's helped the Patreon grow. It's helped my own audience grow in a way where I could kind of have my cake and eat it too, where people know who I am a little bit, but it's not my personality that they're for. They're there for the story, and they know that I do good work.
Yeah.
So that's what's really important to me.
Yeah, and it helps the story and also helps build a Patreon. I can see in the way that like you being involved a little bit more makes people, it gives the extra incentive to like, I think, support, right? Because it's not just projects you're putting money into. It feels like you're giving money to a person, which is, I guess, essentially
there's a connection that's forged, right?
Yeah.
So like, and I've seen it more like I've kind of be like, well, I love your work, or all this kind of stuff, and like they stop me at events, and that's still a little weird for me sometimes. Where I'm like, oh hey, hi.
You're like with a camera, you're like, bro, I gotta film this.
That's like, literally happened more times than not. Where they're like, hey, I was like, I gotta go, so I'm running away. Thanks so much. But I think if you look at not the strength, but if you look at like how many patrons I have opposed to people who have bigger audiences than me, like Corey Gaming or even Born Free or stuff like that. And you see that I don't have as big an audience as they do, but I have a pretty healthy, sizable patron size, because I've done so much work with not only just, the quality of my work or the personality that I show or the work ethic that I display, but I've also done a good job of, if you become a patron of Hold Back the Block, you become part of the process. I tell you what I'm doing. I give you, you're a patron yourself. Like I give you like sneak peeks of what I'm doing. I give you a calendar update. Like I get you very involved in the process, and you can choose to either engage with that. A lot of people don't, like they treat it like a tip jar or something like that. But there was a thing that we were doing where we wanted to, like right before all this stuff broke out, a couple of teams had reached out and they were like, we would like to support, but in a way that doesn't, conflict with, like, we don't want to have like force you to be like, well, now you can do 17 pieces on Radiance. Like, no,
right,
I'm not going to do that. So we devised this idea with Radiance of like, what do we have like special contributors to? And they're like, cool, when do we do that? I go, well, I have to check with my patrons first, like especially the $20 ones, because it affects how long their name's on the screen.
Yeah.
And unless they all agree to it, we're not doing it, because those are my clients. That's my audience. That's my paying audience.
I like the way you call them clients. That's actually an interesting way to think about it. Yeah.
So we could talk a little bit with content, but I don't care. Like, and Gerald talked about this, about the length of his videos and stuff like that in our piece, but I don't really care about how many views a video gets. I'll use it as a promotional tool. Like I promoted the Gerald thing, like, wow, we're almost at 30K. That's cool. I don't care how long we do. I'm trying to build a platform that is kind of ad agnostic and viewer agnostic, where if the 80 or so patrons like what I'm doing, that's what we're doing. Yeah. If a video happens to get 100 views or 1 million views, great. But all I care about are the people that are putting their hard money to my work. Those are my clients. Those are my audience. That's who I'm speaking to. And if everybody else kind of gets into it, dope.
Yeah, and that's why you sent that 4K headshot you knew that people. What happened?
So if you've never made a Patreon before, what happens is you only have access to a certain amount of like rudimentary tools to make your page, right? You don't have a place to upload stuff or anything like that. So I was making it on my phone, that last part. They asked you to make a thank you page. And making a thank you page is important because it helps build a connection between you and your patrons. Because like you can just not make it and be like, congrats, you've subbed to Hold Back the Block, and then that's it. Yeah. Whereas like, it's important to me that people realize that they are literally changing my life with the patron they're giving me. They're becoming a patron, changes my life. It enables me to make the things I want to make.
Right. Okay.
So I took that picture with my phone. Smarter systems, like a website, stuff like that, would like automatically resize that to, a capable, smaller image that would render right on, emails and web pages and stuff like that.
I see.
It took the 4K image and just threw it up there. And
I just dumped it on us.
I did not know it was emailing the 4K image to people. So as soon as you blew me up on your stream, thanks.
That's great.
I went back and I resized it.
It's all right. I already saved it. It's got its own folder on my computer. Esteban 4K, the ultimate
that's the worst
shine.
thing of me that's been saved on the computer, so I'll go with it.
Yeah, it's probably better that way, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, so you talked a lot about the Patreon. I think my favorite thing that you mentioned, obviously, we talked about it with all content, is like, it is about creating stuff that you are really happy with, and also your viewers are very happy with. There is a nice balance there of like, you don't want to just make things that your viewers are happy with and you don't love also, right? I think it's important to have that nice balance. But yeah, I think when it comes to creating stuff, you do whatever makes you happy, and that's the most important part. You know, like there are some people who feel so beholden, I guess, to making certain kinds of things. And I think that is a dangerous thing because you'll burn out faster and you'll create less and you'll be just so unhappy with the stuff that you make, you know?
Yeah, a lot of people, it's important to make consistent content.
Yeah.
What consistent means, it means a couple of things. One, it means consistent to whatever values or whatever goals you're trying to uphold or hit.
Yeah.
So like for me, it's telling the story of the fighting game community, you know, documenting the past, exploring the present, and looking forward to the future, right? Like that's the goal of Hold Back to Block, is to do all that stuff with fighting games. And consistency is, it would be impossible for me to do one of these a week. Absolutely impossible. I would actually be dead.
I see.
So what happens is you can't get into a cycle of like, I have to do this every day or every week or any kind of like that. Like that might work for some content. That might work for some content creators. But in order to do what I do, there has to be kind of you have to set the pace, right? There has to be like, you know, I release, which is like completely contradictory to like the YouTube algorithm. I release very long videos occasionally.
Yeah. You and Gerald both are just, YouTube hates you. They're like,
but again, like he said, like we don't make videos for algorithms. We make videos for people. And I think people are receptive to that, where I think especially now, people want to be told a good story.
Yeah.
People want to be taken somewhere. They want to be taken on a journey. And so I was actually reading through comments and stuff like that, which I don't normally do, but I was very bored and somewhat drunk in my apartment, where I was just kind of reading through comments of like, all right, let's see what people are saying. Because like the Gerald video exploded since he put out.
Yeah.
And I saw your podcast also went up like a bunch of views because he put out another core game.
Yeah,
video.
it did very well.
Yeah, and so like I was going through and people were like, wow, this is awesome, all this kind of stuff, like this is great, like please release more and stuff like that. So like there's a desire for it, right?
Yeah.
So you want to find your niche and target it, but not like, you don't want to kill it because you don't want to kill yourself. So like you find like this good rhythm of like, I'm going to release something maybe every 3 months or when the need arises or when I feel like I've got something capable to put out or something I want to put out. And so it's consistent with your goals and consistent with like the schedule that you set for yourself.
Yeah, I think that kind of consistency is a dangerous word because I think some people just think that means every day.
Yeah,
and
you'll die.
Yeah, you'll explode. Even me, right? Like I stream 5 days a week, which I think is very comfortable for me. But I stream 4 hours a day. It's not a long stream, right? Some people are like, I gotta stream 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day, like 6 days a week, 7 days a week, rise and grind. You know, like I see people who are like, oh, now that we're all quarantined, you got to stay inside and learn 4 new languages.
Get me started.
That shit is so stupid. I can't believe it.
We are in a global fucking pandemic.
Yeah.
I think when events started getting canceled and stuff like that, like last month, I spent 2 weeks like being just numb. Like I couldn't feel anything. Like I was like, grieving like the what I thought would be the end of my career, essentially.
Yes.
And then some assholes like, well, you've got to fucking learn Portuguese now because rise and grind. It's like,
Portuguese, bro. You got to learn how to Portuguese and temper chocolate. You can learn some skills. I'm like, what the fuck, man? No, I like just, you lose a humongous chunk of your income. The world is locked down. It's a big deal. Like, it's like, no, I don't want to rise and grind.
Yeah, give me 2 weeks to process this, and then maybe I'll like learn, because I don't even know that yet. All right. Yeah. So I think, but I do think there is something to take from that message, not the whole rise and grind thing. I do think, though, that you have to have initiative and you have to put in effort that if you want to do something. It's not just going to happen, right? It's like learning a language. Like, I have a bunch of Japanese textbooks and I can somewhat speak Japanese, but if I really want to get good at it, I have to make that a part of my routine.
Yeah.
So, like, editing is a part of my routine. I wake up, I play a couple games of Magic, I eat breakfast, and I edit. And then, I make a schedule and routine. You have to kind of put it in. It's like working out, right? Like you have to kind of do it and get it into your schedule and get it into your routine, and then it'll work. But yeah, you also have to take time to process that the world is falling apart, and like, you might not have stable footing anymore, and you have to kind of figure that out. So yeah, anybody who tells you to rise and grind, especially in the middle of a global pandemic, just do what I do. Go over to your Twitter and mute them. Don't even block them. Don't even give them the satisfaction of knowing they can't see anything anymore. You just mute them. That's the tech.
Yeah, and you never look at them ever again.
No,
well,
never.
I guess that's the last thing we'll chat about is COVID affecting all the events and stuff. I've
never heard of it.
Yeah, me neither. I didn't either. I tweeted about it a little bit, and I was saying, it's a big deal, obviously, for a lot of people in the community. It's part of what made me want to start the podcast, is to talk and kind of highlight a lot of the people in our community who, a lot of their work and a lot of the stuff that's going on with them has just evaporated and disappeared. We're all the way through Combo Breaker getting canceled, and I expect all the events in June and probably August and even later on and stuff are going to get canceled, which is a huge majority of a lot of people's workload, yourself and I included. And I was tweeting stuff like, hey, for this year, I suspect that at minimum 25 to 30% of my income will go away. And that's after... Yeah, that's after streaming. Like, that's streaming every day to, like, make up for not traveling at all. That's, like, me doing stuff still, right? And I was saying that I think of all the commentators, I am in the best case scenario, probably, right? Of the people who are full-time, which is scary because I'm, like, minimum 25 to 30% income loss is best case scenario for the full-time commentators. So, when I talk about that stuff, I want to be open with people and tell them that kind of stuff. Almost every single kind of facet of, I guess, like, people's jobs everywhere are going to be touched, but in our community, tons of freelancers I am very concerned about, and I think it's important why you mentioned your Patreon is such a big deal right now. And there is no event work, which for you and I both, despite us having other projects and diversifying the stuff we do, is a huge amount of our income and work.
Yes. To be honest, like, for one thing, it killed everything I had.
Yeah.
Like, straight up. Like, all my income is gone outside of the Patreon stuff and stuff like that. And I don't run ads on my videos because I hate ads. I think they interrupt the viewing experience. So, like, especially, like, right now, like, I'm trying to read, like, New York Times article about a goddamn pandemic, and you can't because a giant thing comes up. It's like, you should subscribe to the New York Times. It's like, fuck off.
Fuck you, New York Times.
God.
If the Washington Street Journal wants to sponsor this stream.
That's right. $100 patron. Come on. I got one more spot.
Yeah.
But like, all of I had a really cool year. I had working with a couple of companies about doing a couple of documentaries, and not just that, but like, I had a couple of things in Japan that we could have done with Hold Back to Block as well, like that. And that has gone away for the time being because we just don't know when all this stuff's going to be. So, like, this year was going to be like a transition year. I was going to use this year to sort of build up the Patreon so that it was less that event work was my 100%, like, or like my 80% like income, and like the patron would be 40 to 35% of the income stuff. Now it is all patron all the time. Patreon. And not like, I haven't like started doing weekly videos, I haven't changed anything, but I have like started to promote projects more and kind of do more like sneak peeks for like $5 and up patrons and stuff like that. So like, they can watch, like, if you're a $5 patron of Hold Back to Block right now, you can watch like a good like 4-minute clip of how Ken Love talks about how KI started, like where it came from. It's stuff like that where like, I'm cutting this stuff together anyway, so let's start putting this out more frequent. But yeah, like it was a real weird scramble, and like every month right now is like a fight to not get evicted. Yeah. So it's scary, and I'm hoping that these unemployment stuff they just kind of institute in the United States kicks in, so I can like pay my rent. Yeah. But that's why the Patreon is like super super important, because I think without that I would be in super trouble, and I'm still in trouble. But I would be like, I don't even want to think about where I'd be if I didn't have the patrons that I have now, because it'd be really bad.
Yeah, and what's interesting is you mentioned that year where you developed a little bit more about your stuff. I think for me that was last year, and if I hadn't done that last year, I think this year I would be extremely concerned. Yeah. Because most of our stuff is on events, and most of our events are also in massive trouble with what's going on as well, right? Like, it's such a big deal. I mean, even Gerald, who's somebody who you don't even think, like, you think events closing, you're like, well, that sucks, but he does video stuff. He just opened an event space, right? It's like, okay. And then Rick was on last week, and Combo Breaker is canceled, and like, a lot of the stuff he does is like, well, there goes that. And Carter, obviously, Hanzo from 10-0, it's like all their work is like, well, I guess that has disappeared. And so, yeah, like, I mean, already in this year, like, so much stuff has disappeared. We're in April, and stuff in May and June and July are going to be canceled and not happen. It's such a big deal with this kind of stuff. So that's why I wanted to start doing this kind of stuff to highlight, the things that you're working on and other people are working on and what we're all doing in this time. Because, yeah, I mean, events are a huge... I think people don't realize, too, because I see comments and stuff that's like, like, I don't know why. I tweeted about commentary, and they're like, I don't know why you guys are worried. Why don't you just do everything online? It's like, sure, you can do online events and weeklies and stuff, but these tournaments and tours are canceled. That is money canceled and gone, and it's not happening. It's not coming back this year. Like, the amount of income lost is tremendous.
And if you're not covered in the right way, they're not coming back.
Yes.
That's the very important thing. Like, Michigan Masters, as far as I know, is done, right?
Yeah.
That event is not coming back. You know, there was real fear. Like, you saw Alex Jabali on Twitter, you know, he was like really worried. Like, if he didn't fix all this kind of stuff that was happening, CEO was like in serious danger. That's like a huge event for the fighting game. So
yeah,
it's not just what's going on now. It's not just that the events this year are canceled. It's a mad scramble to protect these events so that come back next year. And the infrastructure that was like just kind of getting put into place, like just figuring itself out, isn't completely destroyed in like a year of like, you know, no events.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, it's almost impossible for them to be okay, because if you have to cancel yourself, a lot of these times you just get destroyed, right? You need whoever owns the, like, you know, hotel you're at or convention center, or like the government of that area to shut down, or you just get smoked. So that is brutal for a lot of our TOs, and as you mentioned, I suspect a lot of them won't want to come back either, because the money they've lost is tremendous, or the fear of just being like, this is a very unstable thing. Like, who knows what could even happen or how much money I could be out if something
it's
like
already
this
an
happens.
unstable thing. Like, if you and I say it all the time, but like, you have to be nuts to run an event in for fighting games, because it's like, it's so scary. Like, I look at what Rick has, like when even Rick, who runs Combo Breaker is like the fighting game event. When he goes into an event every year, he's like, this might be, well, I mean, it's also a little bit of Rick's, like that's how he functions as an artist, right? Like, this could be the end of everything. Yeah. And it's like, you know, there's so much stress and there's so much anxiety that goes. And then to be like, oh yeah, by the way, all that stuff that you had already, let's magnify it by threefold with a giant pandemic that might actually bankrupt you personally or end like your financial situation forever. Like, so it's so much to take on already. Whereas to add all the all the contract stuff, and hotels don't want to cancel because they're greedy and they want their money. It's like, it's so much. Like, they are like the real heroes. That's why I do like local series and stuff like that, because like, I want to highlight these people that put so much on the line, more than people think, like, so often. Like, it's I could never do it.
I would never want to be. I always say on my stream, being a TO seems like the worst shit in the world. I can't think of anything worse. You know, I'm like, I would never want to be a TO. It just seems like such a rough job. And when I look at the reward, I'm like, nah, I'm cool. Especially you like hear about these events where like the TO is stressing and they're having this worst time and everything. Like, cool, we did this event, potentially could have bankrupted us. You know, it was like incredibly scary and dangerous, and there's all these horrible things about it. We profited, you know, $3,000. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, we're gonna split that up amongst our 25 staff members, and you know, boom, we just go, job well done. Can't wait to do it next year.
You know, I heard somewhere that TOs were making 30K, you know, an event. I don't know.
Making 50, 90, 150 billion. Like, yeah, it's absurd. I'm cool, man. I don't need that in my life. I'm like, nah, this is too much stress. Like, it seems too dangerous for me. Too much work, too much stress. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think they are the real heroes, and also in real danger given everything that's going on. Have you?
They're the ones, like, you and I we can probably make it work, right? Even if like streaming or videos we can take our skills and apply it to a job whenever those happen again, like a full-time job. Someone can do that running events, but if an event gets canceled, that could devastate their personal finances if they're not. You know, if they're not an LLC or anything like that. So it's terrifying.
Yeah, and it's in our community, like, a lot of the people who run these events they're not businesses. They are not owned by massive companies. They're just people in the community who run events out of, you know, the fact that they want them to exist. A lot like the reasons we create things, right? It's the reason that they have events. They've made events. It's the same kind of reasons. So yeah, I mean, I've noticed lately in your case, you've been doing more Patreon stuff. You've been streaming a lot more. Given that you can't go to events and you can't film stuff, has your plan for the year pivoted, I guess?
Not yet, because I have so much. The only thing that's really changed is that some events get put. HGDQ has moved, or SGDQ, Summer Games Done Quick, has moved from July to August, right? So like, that changes the timings of things I want to put out, because I want to put out my piece on them right before whatever they do happens. And you know, whether that actually happens in August or not, who knows? I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think anything happens this year.
Yeah.
I just should be safe just because of the nature of things. So like it changes schedule stuff. I haven't gotten to the point of like, okay, I want to film something new. How do I do that?
Yeah.
In this climate, but I've done that before with like the Them's Fighting Herds documentary. My interview with Lauren Faust is all remote. That's not in person. So it's not like impossible. It just requires a little bit more planning, a little bit more thought of like, okay, how do we show this when I can't really leave my apartment? And I'm so busy with the Killer Instinct stuff. That's gonna ride me a couple of months in terms of like, not only do we have the documentary, but I think we might have 2 to smaller videos similar to the netcode feature that we have.
The Keats one,
just about KI. Like I definitely have enough with Infilament on his guide. Like I want to do a whole video of him talking about putting that together, because like if you've never gone to ki.infil.net, you should, especially after the stream today, because like it is the best fighting game, but it's fighting game guide that has ever been made. Like the fact that you can play KI at your keyboard and practice things like combo breaker timings and all that kind of stuff, it's never been done before, and maybe for good reason, because it's a lot of work. And constantly, but it's a love letter to a great game. So like we might do something on that. We might do something on like character design or something like that. We're not sure yet. So like the KI stuff out of it will keep me busy for a couple of months.
I see.
And then from there I have, you know, the Wooly video and then GDQ, and then we'll see what happens from there. But there are ideas. I know Gerald mentioned that he had it's funny because like Gerald, it was like a weird time where like I was putting something out on Gerald, and then you were doing a podcast with him. And then Gerald says, I was putting together a commentary video, and then Gerald says, I have an idea for commentary. I'm like, God damn it, we're just all stepping on top of each other at this point.
Just climbing over each other to fight for the same idea.
Yeah, so like, you know, there are ideas that are still possible. But I need to see what the state of the world is like once I get out of Killer Instinct. Right now, it's all Killer Instinct all the time.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not editing it, I'm playing it. So like I was literally playing before I got on this podcast. So.
Yeah, I mean that's the big thing that's coming out next for you, I guess, right? The next big project is the Killer Instinct stuff, and a lot of people have been playing it again lately. So like it's been on a lot of people's minds too.
So many people have been playing it. So like it's like the right time. Like I was so happy. Man, this is it. All the house cards are getting set up. This is gonna be great. Sonic Fox is playing, the Kill Stage is playing. So just keep playing it for another month, and then maybe
make sure you play it around the day that this is gonna come out. May this, like, you know, start playing the week before. Yeah, I've noticed a lot of people are really interested in it lately, which is great. I mean, you know what's funny is like all these new people have been trying it, and I haven't streamed it yet, just because I was like streaming
really
other stuff. Yeah, I was like, oh god. So that's why today I was like, you know, I'll stream some KI after this is over, since we've been talking about it as well. But yeah, I mean, you know, the interesting thing is like, you know, when you look at something like this KI documentary, something this big, it's interesting because I think about like how many documentaries about fighting games have there been put out that are this big, and I realize like so many of them are little videos, or so many of them is your work, right? There's a ton of stuff that you've put out and a ton of stuff around this, so I'm really interested. Is this the longest project that you've put out? It's longer, I think, than the FGC one was, right?
FGC was about an hour and 10 minutes with 5 minutes of credits because of all the Kickstarter backers we had. It's hard to say because it's not in a shape where I know the final running time yet. Like I keep saying an hour and a half, but it might be 15. It's definitely gonna be more than an hour. It's just too much. Yeah. But it most
17 1-hour videos, you know, or interview, 1 hour to like 2 hour interviews. Yeah. It's
God, you know, welcome to my Ken Burns documentary on Killer Instinct. Just slow zoom. Black and white photos. Yeah, but that's a filmmaker joke. But it's probably going to be the longest I do. I'm trying to hit an hour and 30, and then we'll see what's left over, because there's just a lot to cover, and not just in terms of like, you know, I don't want to say drama, but like it's a weird story, right? Like what fighting game has developer handoffs in the middle of seasons? In fact, what fighting game had seasons before Killer Instinct? So it's a lot of talking about how this game, one, how it even existed, because the tech behind the game and how they found the team is a hoot. And then like not only to lose a team that you built up slowly and that like kind of found by circumstance because of just like weird stuff, and then to kind of give it to another team and be like, hey, you now have season 2 of KI, you have like 4 weeks to build a character.
That's the part I don't think people realize is how quickly the turnaround was from IG getting the game and then having to build TJ and Maya.
Maddening. It's maddening. And not just the handoff, but like they had to build that first game in like a year. Like that's unheard of. So there's a lot of stuff in there. And it's like, it's interesting, right? Because like a lot of player focused or community focused, where I think this is one of the first, like, not to say that they're not interesting, because the CAD community is great, but like in terms of like the grander scale of the story, the development of the game is definitely the most interesting part about it. So it's trying to also find a balance between all this stuff that happens with the game and what happens after the game's released with the community, and not trying to let one side, overwhelm the other. So yeah.
I was going to say the devs are really involved in KI in general. They were always so vocal with everybody, and they did a lot of stuff like a community outreach things that I don't think other developers did. Like the communication between KI devs and them was so... It's funny, I remember back in like 2015 or something, I remember telling KI players, you guys are so fucking spoiled. You guys have all these answers, and meanwhile, Combo Fiend's in a bunker somewhere. No one's heard from him in like 4 months or something. Like nobody's heard from the Street Fighter or Capcom devs at this time for forever. I remember like yelling at KI players about it, and it's funny to think that that was like 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Now that I was like, you guys have it so good with your communication, and then you just see what modern fighting game communication it looks like, and you're like, wow, yeah, man.
There's a lot of things that there's like KI did that are not replicated now. Like we talk about the netcode all the time. Like obviously that's one to one, but like the communication between developer and consumer, right? Like they were out. Like these were people who loved fighting games, both not just Iron Galaxy but Double Helix. Like Double Helix would be at events and they would be in the crowd watching. They would be there, open to anybody, not just like top player privilege.
Playing games too, and like in tournaments and stuff.
And that's something that we talked about because that kind of stems from the original KI. Like you could not work on the original KI unless you beat Ken Lobb in Street Fighter. That was the rule. Because they did not want people who did not understand fighting games on this game. And that went into 2013, and as well as Iron Galaxy, like Keats, he's a EBO finalist, I believe. Did he win Tatsunoko versus Capcom? Or
I think
top 8.
He was top 8, but he didn't win that year.
8, yeah. But like Keats has a mind for fighting games. You have Delreich in there. He mind for fighting games. Like fighting game players are touching these games.
Yeah.
I do think there were lessons learned, and we'll touch about in the doc, where like maybe being so open is bad, and we're seeing a lot of that with like Blowback and like Tekken right now.
Yeah.
Like I mean, there was a fucking 10-man podcast about them yelling about the game.
I didn't see it, but I'm so curious to go back and look. Yeah.
It's 10 people talking over each other. It's great. But like. There's a balance, right? And a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people, which is why another reason why I wanted to do what I want to do is like a lot of people don't realize that there are other humans at the other end. So like when you're yelling at a company or when you're attacking somebody for balances, that's somebody with like a family or like a own life, and like they're just trying to do their job and they're trying to do it right. And you're like, I hope you die because now you can't sidestep this or whatever. Like it's like, so like a big focus of Hold Back the Block, as well as like telling these stories, was also kind of humanizing the process and telling you like, hey, these are people that have their own like their own lives and their own dreams and their own goals and their own like fears and all that kind of stuff, and kind of putting a face to the name. And with the KI project, like everyone I talked to was game. Like they were ready to go. Like we have Bao from Double Helix, we have Adam and Isaac from Iron Galaxy. All of Microsoft was like I thought they would be I never actually expected to talk about Microsoft, anybody from Microsoft. I thought this was going to be like just like Double Helix, Iron Galaxy, and most of the community.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They contacted me. James Goddard contacted me. He was like, hey, we heard you doing this KI thing. Or like Max, like I get Max reached out to him. He was like, we heard you doing this KI thing. And they were like a little concerned about the story because they don't want me to drum up game like any kind of excitement for anything that may or may not exist or anything like that.
Sure, yeah.
So when I told them the story, they're like, cool. How about I have like James Goddard was like, how about you come out here and I'll talk to you. I'll get Adam Eisgreen, I'll get Ernest Young, and I'll get Ken Lobb, and I'll just get them all in a day, and we'll just schedule a whole day out. So they did that for me.
Yeah.
And when I went out there, they had like signs. I have pictures of it. They had like signs that said like Killer Instinct documentary filming in progress. Like don't like help us not get combo broken and then be quiet while we're doing this interview. Like they said they were so cool.
Yeah,
so
that is
everybody
awesome.
like really wants to talk about this game, and so I'm hoping that shines through, is that the love for this game, like everyone who's worked on it, who's touched it, who's played it, has such an extreme love for it, and hopefully humanizes the process of like making it and playing it.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot that goes into it, and like as you mentioned, yeah, that kind of like attackative nature is like so brutal. You see it on Twitter all. That's why like I saw this like Tekken people attacking like Michael Murray and the balance, and like people are like, no, I think it's fine, and they're like, fuck you, you think it's fine? Like they're attacking each other, and I'm just like, Oh man, it is like such a messy thing to look at, right? It's just so awful. Brutal.
Because like I talk to Mike all the time. Like and I'm very lucky that I with those guys, especially like Bandai Namco. Like if it wasn't for Bandai Namco, I would not have the career I have. Like I would still be doing this on the side, working on a miserable website somewhere. But like, you know, I have great respect for them, and they have great respect for me, where I like to think so. So like, you know, there are things I don't like in Tekken, like, for sure. But like, I'll just have this conversation, like, oh, why'd you do this? And they're like, well, we decided to do this. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I don't agree with it, but it's not my game, right?
Yeah.
So, but I also, and it's like weird, right? I don't get annoyed by balancing and patching as much as most people do, because like, I don't know if it's just because I play in arcades a lot or anything like that. We're like, oh, like if somebody's super overpowered, that's how they are. Like,
that's just
learn how to
life.
deal with it. I play Vampire Savior. Vampire Savior, all the characters are broken. All the characters, even the worst character in the game, has something that could just end your life with. Like, it's just a nightmare. So, like, you either bitch about it and don't play it, or learn to adjust and play around it.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, like, or play the character. Like we saw with Leroy in Evo Japan. Like, if you can't beat the character, fuck it, play Leroy.
Yeah, play the character, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's like going to gunfight with, like, well, I've got a maybe you should have picked the bazooka. What are you trying to prove?
Yeah, like what's the I don't know. It's, you know, I had to talk about that on my channel too, but yeah, I get what you mean. It's the whole thing is, yeah, it's just so ugly, and like the community reaction and like the development, like that kind of back and forth when it's that negative, it just creates such a bad situation for everybody, right? It creates such a negative feeling around the game, which I think KI had issues with, and Tekken currently has some issues with, and like it's especially obvious, I think, with everybody around just not being able to go to events. So I think a lot of the goodwill and like feeling of being at events is like kind of lost on us too, and I think that helps the community quite a bit. It is definitely a weird time, but
yeah, and there's a lot of frustration, but I don't think it's just fully on the games. I think it's a lot of the circumstances of the world right now as well. Like everyone's cooped up, and they just need some kind of outlet, and they just want to scream because, like, you know, it's a mess right now.
Yeah. Well, in that sort of aspect,
what a way to end a podcast.
It's true though. It's true. I remember, dude, I did a COVID watch week like a month and a half ago. I was like, guys, this is a big deal. And there's people in the chat. It's a flu. Everything will be fine. I can't wait to see you at Combo Breaker. I
heard so. Not to like extend, because I know you have a stream to get to, but like when we were in Evo Japan, right?
Yeah.
Like
that was when the first case in Japan happened.
The only one that took it really seriously was Juna.
Yes.
Where like I didn't do any, but so everybody left like Tokyo, and I went to South Korea to do the thing with Gerald. And that's when I noticed that, like, oh, this is getting, like, serious. Because Gerald, they had done their first Smash event. They had lost 50 people, 35 to 50 people coming to that event. Because when Heyday Studios, now known as Korea Events, when they do Smash events, they're big. They have, like, hundreds. They didn't have that. They had, like, 40. So I was talking to Josh. He's like, yeah, we lost, like, a bunch of people this morning because no one wants to go out. Then I went back to Japan. So I went back to Japan for a couple more days or night or stuff like that. And I noticed that signs were getting put up in the window of like, please excuse our appearance. We're going to be wearing masks. Don't take it. And I was like, oh shit, this is a problem. And like everybody who thinks this is just a flu, like I've been in Japan when flu broke out, stuff like that. Like this is a real problem if like signs are going out and like signage and the messaging of like what's happening and stuff like that. And then, you know, I came back here and everyone was like, oh, it's just a flu. And I'm like, no. This is
just wait.
We should prepare. And then no one really did. And then all of a sudden, like, you know, we are where we are now, right?
Yeah.
So like it was weird to be over in Asia as it was happening in two different countries and to see it ramp up within a weekend. I was like, uh-oh. Like I'll put it this way. When I was in South Korea and I was leaving the airport, they were banning all Chinese passengers. Like essentially. They were like, you can't leave or you can't come in. And I was like, oh, I need to get home before I can't leave and I can't come in.
Yeah, you're just like, stuck in Japan. Like uh-oh. Yeah.
So I mean, there were worse places to be stuck in.
Yeah,
I miss my DDR.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't go to the arcade now, but
that's what you think.
The thing I was gonna say too is like, yeah, so like Wednesday Night Fights, it closed on some week. The 2 weeks before Wednesday Night Fights closed, I didn't go to either week because I saw what was going on, and like there was cases in Orange County, which is where it is, and I was like, I'm not going. I didn't go for like the 2 weeks before it, and then I didn't go, and then obviously it got canceled. But I think like the numbers were still pretty good, like the second to last week before, and I was like, nah, not me, man. I'm not going. I won't be there. But you know, we are where we are now, I guess, right? So
this will be. I'm incredibly curious, not just on like the scale how things will change after this, but on like the fighting game scale, like how do things adjust? Like was something like this happening, something that pushed ArcSys to be like, we're going to put rollback note code into Strive.
Yeah,
like
I don't know
what kind of fact, like, and that will probably be stuff that I tackle if I'm lucky enough in upcoming projects. So
I would love to watch that video. I need to see the video of you getting to the bottom in like investigative journalism, rolling up the sleeves to get into the bottom of why this happened.
It's definitely something I'm very curious to see, but it'll take a couple of years to see.
Yeah.
So, but I will say this. I will say things will, like, a lot of people are kind of suffering right now, and it sucks right now, and it's hard, but it will get better. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So it sucks a lot right now. We're just going to have to tough it out and get through it. But once we get through it, we can get back to where we were and possibly even greater heights. So just hang out, stick in there.
I can't. It's so weird to think about how long it's been since I've been to a fighting game event. It's like so incredibly unusual for my normal day-to-day life. But yeah, it'll come back around, and it's kind of the stuff that you take for granted until it's gone, I think, a lot of the times. Well, where can people find all the lovely things you do, including your Patreon, your Twitter, the YouTube stuff that you work on, all that kind of stuff?
So you can find me on Twitter at twitter.com.
All right, you cut out during that. Let's try that again.
You can find me on twitter.com/TheBesteban. I post a lot of sarcastic tweets and pictures of cats, and occasionally my projects. If you want to watch what I make, youtube.com/holdbacktoblock. And if you like what you see and would like to help, contribute into the production of all this stuff, you can become a patron at patreon.com/holdbacktoblock. We've got all sorts of various tiers. If you just want to pitch in for a little bit and see some updates, we got $3 tier. If you want some like behind the scenes stuff, we got $5 tier. If you want the videos I make early, $10. If you want your names on the credits, $20. So really broken out. Do what you will. You don't have to stay there all the time. You can come in, come out, stuff like that. But every little bit, whether it's from sharing the videos on Twitter or becoming a patron, every little bit helps me. So whatever you can do, please do.
I did not know what being a $10 patron did.
I know you didn't, because you thought your name was going to show up in the credits, and that's not how it works.
I didn't know that happens either. I went to do it at $5, and it was like, the thing that you clicked is $10, and I was like, what? I don't know what that means. I've never used Patreon in my life. I literally can confidently say I did not look at the page, the tiers, or the rewards. I just went in and was like, I will pay whatever $5 is. And then it was like, you can't do that. You need to pay $10 for the thing you clicked. And I was like, I didn't mean to. And I just gave him $10. I was like, I don't know what's happening. I was like, so you got an extra $5.
To read the website gave me an extra $5.
I didn't know what it was. I'm not used to the website at all. I was like, and I just gave them $10 because they threatened me. They're like, you were like, this is the wrong tier. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know what I did.
You were in the wrong neighborhood, white boy.
That's what happened. I was like, bro, my bad, I'm cool. And then it was too late. I was like, well, at this point, I'll just put $10 in. So now I would know that to get my name in is 15, right?
20.
20. All right, I'm gonna give you 3. Let me just go change the.
It's not because I'm trying to take advantage of everybody's vanity, but it's because of the fact that if we made that like a $5 tier, then it would just be. There'd be so many names and credits, it'd be a nightmare. So we call that the producer role. So you're honorary producer.
I see.
And then if you're a team and like to help out more, there's a special tier for you as well. But the goal of Hold Back to Block is to be completely ad free, completely we don't want to have any sponsors, we don't want to have any overseers. So this is a way for us to be able to do our projects the way we want to do them and tell the stories that we want to do without being handcuffed or without having to focus on whatever gets the most views or anything like that. So.
Yeah, that is why I run ads and have Twitch subs, because I have no sponsors and no obligations, and Moss and I got to keep the lights on.
That's right. No rules.
It's better that way for now, right? If you see Esteban decked out in gear and shit, that's how you know COVID's gone on too long. You're like, he's not wearing the Eagles jersey, he's wearing an esports team jersey, it's over.
That's right. I love Monster Energy drinks. Oh, wait, Bang Energy? Oh, they're paying the lights on.
You're reading 2 emails. You're like, which tastes better with the higher dollar sign?
If I start talking about Raid Shadow Legends, just put a bullet in me because it's over.
I haven't even gotten that email. Everybody else is like...
I have gotten that email.
What the hell? I got offered another mobile game that I turned down. It was a lot of money. They offered so much money for me to play some mobile game, and I turned it down. And it wasn't the times we're currently in when this email had slid in my way. It was like, you play this mobile game, we'll give you X amount of money with $4 signs, and I was like,
I've got 15 minutes. I could probably make this work.
I said no because I knew my stream would murder me, but I was like,
Yeah, I got the email for Raid Shadow Legends. They're like, have you heard of... And that's when I was like, wow, I guess the channel's doing pretty well, huh? I knew this is happening. Huh? That was like my first sign of success of like, wow, all right, this is it. And then I deleted the email and I never wrote it again.
That was the end. I like how you got censored right when you said it. You went to speak and then it like didn't pick up what you said. It's like, have you heard of...
Everyone knows. You close your eyes and right before you lose consciousness, it's Raid Shadow Legends. And then you go into...
I can't believe I haven't been messaged about this. Or maybe I have and I just deleted it. But when people send me this stuff... Yeah, I'm sure it's in there. Raid Shadow Legends. I don't even know what it's about. I love Raid Shadow Legends. Novel. Logo facing out. That's what you're supposed to do, right? I don't really know how it is. Oh, Moss is ready. Every time your voice cuts out, he's going to just use an Iron Man Infinite clip. Just play like the
perfect.
Scream. Hey, that was you that gave me the soundboard, so it all worked out. Thanks for that. That thing is really useful. I use it on stream.
And just like Ricky patched it with a newer version, so
it's like his guide. He just can't help himself. Yeah.
You can now do the combo break on the
Your mic is cracking me up. It's probably the gain on Discord is what I'm guessing, the voice gain on Discord.
Yeah, because you're also cutting out for me sometimes too. So.
Yeah, it's probably Discord being assholes, but you know how it be do. Well, thanks for coming on and chit-chatting with me. We went over what I expected, which has happened in all 4 podcasts so far, unsurprisingly. I appreciate you coming on and chit-chatting with me. If you guys want to follow any of Esteban's stuff, if you missed where all the links were, people have been posting it in the chat, but it'll also be in the YouTube video, which will probably be up either later tonight or tomorrow. They go up pretty quick. And then they're also on any podcasting platform if you guys want to check it out. Like, besides Apple, because Apple wants me to make an account, and I don't fucking remember what my iTunes account is. So I'll just make one eventually. I'll just go back and do it. You're
going to go far in this business. I fucking know what account this is. Whatever.
I don't, dude. It's like, what's your iTunes account? And I was like, bro, I use Spotify. I don't fucking know. Like, I haven't used iTunes in so long. I don't even, like, I'm sure I have one because I have an iPhone, so I must have like an Apple account.
It can't be your birth certificate.
Yeah, I'll just give it to him.
Look
I'll
on the
like,
back.
Here's my social security card. Here's my birth certificate. All this, just take it. Whatever it is. Now, can I fucking upload my podcast to your goddamn website? I don't know, man. Whatever it is. iTunes doesn't exist. Apple Music. Whatever it is. Apple.
Yeah, whatever it is.
You know what I'm saying? The people. Those guys. You know them? You heard of them? Raid Shadow Legends?
You're just on the street. Could somebody just give me
this fucking thing? Raid Shadow Legends.
Maintaining a 6-foot distance, though. That's the important part.
Yeah, 6 foot social distancing. You heard it here first. Raid Shadow Legends, brought to you by Raid Shadow Legends. All right,
drops enabled.
Drops enabled. Drops are enabled. Thanks for coming through, chat room. Thanks for coming through, Esteban. You can find this later. Peace out, everybody. Thanks for coming through.
Later.
Yeah, I'm gonna go stream.